Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you on behalf of Pakistan Discussion Forum and Bloomsbury Pakistan. Pakistan Discussion Forum is a newly established student society of SOAS, and what we are trying to do is we are trying to create some discussion of issues of importance. So we would like everyone to look forward to our future work, and we are quite happy that you've joined us tonight. I would now like to invite our chair, Dr. Maria Rashid, and the problem with standing is that you don't know whether to wear your glasses or not because you can't see what you see. Okay, so Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Rima has already welcomed you, so I'll just briefly introduce myself and then move on. So my name is Maria Rashid and I am affiliated with Bloomsbury Pakistan. I also work with the London School of Economics, and my affiliation with Bloomsbury is official and informal and also very informal thanks to Nadia Chima, so you get roped into lots of events suddenly. So today's session is the book launch of Dr. HOODBHOY's new work titled Pakistan, Origins, Identity and Future, which is published by Guthridge. And Dr. HOODBHOY is very well known to most of us who are familiar with Pakistan, so I'm not going to attempt a very extensive or exhaustive introduction, especially since his accomplishments are varied and many. But just to do justice to some extent, I thought I should introduce you a little bit. So Dr. HOODBHOY is a Pakistani nuclear physicist and activist who served at the faculty of various institutions of higher education, both in Pakistan and outside, such as the Forman Christian College, Qaid-e-Azam University, MIT, University of Maryland, and the Carnegie Mellon University and Princeton. He's a prominent activist and one who's particularly invested in issues such as the freedom of speech, secularism, and education, to name some of the themes that he speaks about, writes about, and campaigns for. He has won several awards, such as the Abdul Salam Prize for Physics, the Kalinga Prize, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, for the popularization of science, and was included in the list of 100 most influential global thinkers by Foreign Policy. In 2013, he was also made a member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board of Disarmament, and he's the author of Islam and Science, Religious Orthodoxy and the Battle for Science. And he continues to write extensively in various foreign and national periodicals, such as the Express Tribune, Dawn, New York Times, and Project Syndicate. And I think it would be fair to say that he's considered one of the most vocal and progressive liberal thinkers that we have in Pakistan today, and has a reputation of speaking truth to power, and has incurred the wrath of the left, right, and center for this at times. I think his most serious recent work, Pakistan, Origins, Identity and Future, is in terms of when I tried to go through the book, it is an ambitious and thoughtfully crafted project that spans Pakistan's past, present, and aspirational futures, and does this in classic HOODBHOY style. So it is a frank and fearless interpretation of Pakistan's nationalist history and fraught politics of identity and state making. And Dr. HOODBHOY, you say in the preface that you started out thinking that you might want to record your own experiences and write a more reflective memoir to tell the stories of yourself as you lived through Pakistan's journey, and then settled for writing a more objective version of Pakistan's state and society. And just responding to that as a social scientist, I just wanted to say, and I say this with hesitation because I know I speak to a rationalist and a scientist, but perhaps taking ourselves out of the story that we write is never really possible. And as someone who believes that the truths we write about are always partial, or at least the truth that we as researchers try and produce is always shaped by our choices, our theoretical lens, our positionality and sensibilities, which shapes our selection of who and what we count as important to focus on. And in that spirit, I just wanted to say that I really appreciated and enjoyed how often in your text and through your writing of Pakistan's present and the very 5 critical questions that you asked to tell the story of our present, we got glimpses of you and your experiences, and I found that a very useful contribution. So thank you for writing this important text. The way we structured the session is we'll first invite Dr. HOODBHOY to speak about the book, and then we follow that up with Dr. Salman Khan, and I'll introduce him once he comes on as a discussant and his reactions to the book's subject matter, and then we open the floor for question and answers at the end. Okay, so Dr. HOODBHOY.
Thank you, Dr. Maria, for this very kind introduction. Just a small correction. Yes, I've taught at many universities, but I've spent my 48 years of my life teaching in one university, which is Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad. What you said is true, that objectivity in history is not strictly possible. And I do respect the fact that there are postmodernists who say that everything that we see is seen through our particular lenses. But I was told so many lies starting from the time when I was a kid that I felt that now that I am 73 years old, I just have to cry out and say what I was fed was nonsense. Let me give you an example, and that is I was 15 years old and I was madly in love with weapons, with planes, guns, tanks, all that. And so when there was a declaration of war in 1965, as a 15-year-old kid, I was euphoric and immediately shouted my pleasure in class, and the teacher had to shut me up. And then immediately, instead of going for lunch home, I cycled to the Air Force recruiting center, which I used to go, aage piche mandlata tha main, hoping that someday they would open the doors to me. I went to recruit myself, and they wouldn't take me. Then I went to the Navy, I went to the Army, nobody would take me. And I was ecstatic that now I would see those great battles against an enemy and a replay of World War II and so forth. It was much later that I found that that was an untruth. And I don't want to take up space talking of all the untruths. But yes, there are objective facts. Facts of history that must be brought out, and in fact, that is why I wrote this 600-page book, which has got 5 parts, 16 chapters, and about 1,000 references. And the references are crucial because I know that I'm not a social scientist, and yet I know that anything I say must be supported by at least something that has been referenced earlier. People like Maria Rashid, who have gone and actually done interviews and talked to people in the Pakistan Army and found out their experiences, what encouraged them into jihad and shahadat and all that. So yes, that is primary research that I take from social scientists. But what I try to do was create a narrative which was far too ambitious, perhaps. Pakistan, origins, identity, and future. And the origins don't go back to 1947. The origins don't even go back to 712 AD, which is when the first Muslim conqueror came to the subcontinent, Muhammad bin Qasim. In fact, one must look at the origins well before that, 3,000 years ago, or 4,000 years ago. We lose track of time because there is no authentic history that's been recorded that far back in the past, which is why people in India are terribly confused about their origin, and which is why they're appealing to an imaginary Hindu identity that existed thousands of years back in the past. So if there's a basic thread that goes through all my 16 chapters, it is the origin of the two-nation theory, which was the basis upon which Pakistan was created and which was articulated in its most clear form by Muhammad Ali Jinnah in Lahore in 1940, where as president of the Muslim League, he said, there are two and only two nations that exist on the Indian subcontinent. They are Hindus and they are Muslims. And although they have lived together for a very long time, yet it is not possible for them to live in peace, and therefore we must cleave the subcontinent and the Muslims must have their own homeland. But it was in 1940 when that two-nation theory came about. To search for its origins means going way, way back. And I don't have time to go into it all, but in a nutshell, yes, Hindus and Muslims were to an extent different, but they weren't so different that the great traveler Al-Biruni, who had accompanied the conqueror slash plunderer Sultan Mahmud Ghazni, the destroyer of the Somnath temple, he had accompanied him to India in the year 980, 990. And he had a very interesting take on all this in his travels. He divided the peoples of India. Remember that Muhammad bin Qasim comes in 712. There is a Muslim population after that, but mostly it's on the coast of the western coast of India. He divides the peoples of India into, well, they are the Turkish, who are Muslims. They are the Iranians who are Muslims. They are the Afghans who are Muslims. And then there are the Hindus. And the local Muslims he called Hindus. Why? Because they came from Al-Hind. And where does Al-Hind come from? It comes from Al-Sindh. Sindhu Darya, the Indus River. And so somebody like me who was born a Muslim in Pakistan would be called by Al-Biruni a Hindu because he just saw people from there. He saw things in a geographical perspective. He did not see it in a religious perspective. I want to go very, very fast. Well, then come the Mughals. The Mughals create a great empire, an empire that lasts about 350 to 400 years and finally ends in 1857. They, for the first time, create a unified India, a mostly unified India. I mean, they bring much of India under their control and they create a system of governance and administration. And in that, they had to have Hindus, and most, in fact, all Mughal emperors had Hindu wives. They married into the Rajputs. They had generals who were Hindus, and this was pragmatism. It was a necessity because the Muslims were very few in number, the Hindus were very large in number, and so therefore it was necessary to bring them into the administration. And so there was not a huge difference between Hindus and Muslims even towards the end of the Mughal Empire, which is 1857. But you know, the beginnings were already there. The Muslims were concentrated upon governing. They were interested in hunting, in being leaders. The work of finance, of business, of trade was something considered not worthy of a Muslim, and that was relegated to the Hindus. And so the Hindus developed skills in a different direction, which was that of reading and writing and, doing simple math and so forth, business. Around that time, about 100 years before the Mughal Empire collapsed, came the British, and they came as traders, as the British East India Company, and then the traders started expanding their influence into India, and there were no major wars fought by the British. There were the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar, but other than that, there was not a military takeover of India. It was slow infiltration. It was through trade. But the British needed a lot of help. There were just 50,000 of them at the most, at the very peak. And so they needed people who could help them in the administration. And for that they said, we need people who can think like us, who are tuned to the modern age. So at that time, the British East India Company was under pressure for supporting educational institutions in India, and within Britain over here. If we had been alive 200 years earlier, we would have seen that battle being raged here in London, where there was a set of people, the Conservatives, saying, no, it'll be easier for us to govern if the people there are kept uneducated, and the Liberals here in Britain who would say, no, but it's our duty to help the colonized people, civilize them, and to educate them. And that's the impulse towards creating enlightenment beyond Britain's borders. Well, that tussle worked out in 1835 when Lord Macaulay decreed that the company would support only such educational institutions as would teach English, science, math, the modern curriculum, and would not support the Gurukulam, the Pathshalas, the Madrasas, and the Maktabs, the traditional Hindu and the Muslim institutions of education. And at that time, I think that was a very significant time, because the different reactions of the Hindu and the Muslim communities essentially created the beginnings of the two nations. And I don't understand why historians haven't put a red line under that as this being so utterly significant. Well, let me tell you what happened. 8,800 Maulvis, ulema, clerics from the Muslim side, they said, we have absolutely the best education possible. We have the word of God in the form of the Holy Quran, and we don't need your money. Among the Hindus, there was also resistance, because there was also a belief that the traditional ways were the best ways. But years earlier, 40 years earlier, there was the Brahmo Samaj, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and a reformist section of the Hindus which said, we need to do away with the old ways of thinking, we need to get into the modern age, we need to do away with practices such as sati and so forth. And they did not encounter a very big resistance. In fact, in time, the Hindus started demanding more and more educational institutions from the British. They said, we need more schools, we need more colleges, we need more universities. And so when the first university was formed, Calcutta University, and I believe it is 1856, well, there were several hundred Hindus who were able to clear the entrance examination, but just a handful of Muslims. And the graduates, there were again a few 100 Hindu graduates, but just 2 Muslims. Now, this continues on, but at this time there's a reformist movement. There's of that of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and he comes very charged. He says, look, we Muslims have got, we were rulers once and we're in a very bad state, but in order to get out of this state of desperation, what we need to do is learn the ways of our victors, of those who have mastered science, modern learning, and it's time to get out of living in the past. Okay, so now the second chapter, the second part of my book is about the 3 founders of Pakistan. One being Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, the other Allama Iqbal, and the third Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Well explored personalities, you would say. But I'm wondering why so much of it is hidden, not just from Pakistanis, but from discourse on Pakistan in general. Now, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan is credited with 2 things. One of them I told you, that he said, we've got to have modern education. By the way, you must tell me, Maria, when I run out of time. How much time do I have?
No, I think I'll let you know 10 minutes before the end.
10 minutes, okay, okay.
Halfway into yours.
I'm halfway, good, good. So, one thing I told you is that he said we must have more education and so forth. Good, that is well known in Pakistan. He's also well known in Pakistan as the founder of the 2-nation theory. Okay, needs a bit of qualification. He did become communal towards the end of his life, but, and I go into detail of that, so that's not a total untruth. It's true somewhat. But of course, for much of his earlier life, he had been very much for Hindu-Muslim unity. What is hidden is that in meeting the challenge of Western learning, he became the most radical reinterpreter of Muslim theology. And he wrote a tafsir of the Holy Quran, whose aim was to make Islam and science consistent with each other. And what he wrote is totally hidden from view in Pakistan. It was absolutely radical. So let me give you some examples of that. He said, look, of course I believe that the Quran is the unaltered word of God, Kalam-e-Ilahi, as is said, and that not a word of that, not a zavar zair pesh of that can ever be wrong. However, you need to go back and you need to understand the meaning of words, the etymology, what those words meant early on. Then he said, you've got to look at science and you've got to make the 2 interpretations match with each other, and hey, what if they don't? Then you take science over religion. Example, miracles. No, they didn't happen. When Prophet Muhammad pointed to the moon didn't split in 2. He said, that's allegorical. It's for dumb people who, need to be given the example of miracles and so forth. Noah's flood couldn't have happened. How on earth do you get so many animals on board, and then what do you feed them except other animals, so they'll all eat up each other, etc., etc. And Adam and Eve. No, there was no Adam, no Eve. It's remarkable that at the time that Darwin was here in London, Syed Ahmad Khan also visited London. He went also to Oxford, and he said, we must, he looked at the buildings in Oxford and he said, what a wonderful place it is. Let's make another Oxford in India, in Aligarh, in fact, and it became eventually Aligarh Muslim University. Well, all that is hidden, brushed under the carpet. Brushed under the carpet is that The mullahs went after him with a vengeance. They asked for his blood. He was sentenced to death by the Mutawalli of the Holy Kaaba. He had 5,555 fatwas of kufr against him. But he had the protection of the British, and so he could get law. He survived that. Okay, I won't go too much into Sayyid Ahmad Khan and the stuff that's hidden about him, but let me come to Allama Iqbal, who is considered one of the after him, the next founder of Pakistan. Well, Allama Iqbal, Allama Muhammad Iqbal is a wonderful poet. He's such a poet that I think the Urdu language has probably not produced one like him. Ghalib, different genre. Okay, so he's very, very highly celebrated for multiple reasons. He's called, first of all, a philosopher and a thinker. In my book, I say that's a monstrous injustice. It's an injustice to truth, and it's actually an injustice to Iqbal. A little bit about Iqbal. A very open-minded, liberal person before he came to Cambridge in 1905. After a year, he went to Heidelberg University in Germany, and 2 years later, in 1908, when he returned to India, to Lahore, which is his hometown, he loathed Western civilization, and the Hindus who he thought of as brothers earlier, he now started thinking of them as the opposition. And between 1908 when he came and 1938 when he died, the 30 years, he was a totally different man as compared to the person who had gone in 1905. Now why? He had gone there to study, he came to the West. He came to the West to study philosophy. And very soon he developed an aversion to it. He did get his PhD from Heidelberg University, and it was on the metaphysics of poetry, metaphysics of mysticism, metaphysics and mysticism in Persia. And he studied basically Sufi philosophy and the philosophy of Maulana Rum. Now everyone talks about him as a philosopher, not just as a poet, but as a philosopher. But if you read his biography as written by his son Javed Iqbal, it's in Urdu, it's called Zinda Rood. जी बिल्कुल आपने सही फरमाया. Zinda Rood में he writes that to his sister Karima Bibi, he says, I wasted my time studying philosophy, and I wish I had done what my father had told me to do, which is to become a cleric. I so regret not having done as our father said I should, but henceforth I am dedicated to Islam. And he said philosophy, it is something that drives you towards disbelief, towards kufr. And in fact, in one of the poems that I've quoted over here, he says that, आप समझें, आज़ादी अफ़कार है इब्लीस की ईजाद. That is to say, freedom of thought is an invention of the devil. Because once your thought is unfettered, then who knows, unbelief can take you anywhere. So he became a different person. He refused a job as a lecturer in philosophy at Government College University in Lahore and so forth. Lots to say about Iqbal. I'm just going very, very, very fast. let me come to Muhammad Ali Jinnah.
10 minutes more?
Thank you. 10 minutes will be good. Muhammad Ali Jinnah is the man without whom Pakistan was not possible. And he is deified. His mausoleum, by the way, is just next to my house, where I grew up, where I was born. And so you don't find him anywhere. In fact, you don't see him mentioned. Earlier on, you see, there was a change in character in Pakistan. And this is why the mood, as you said, affects what are considered historical truths. So earlier on, whenever there would be Pakistan Day, there would be three pictures. There would be Sayyid Ahmad Khan, there would be Iqbal, and there would be Jinnah. And now there are just two left. So Jinnah is credited with a great deal of wisdom, is credited with making Pakistan, and it's actually true that without Jinnah there would not have been Pakistan. However, there are things that are so badly misrepresented about Jinnah that I felt that absolutely he had to be revisited, and I revisited him on two key issues. The first is that Jinnah had a vision for Pakistan. Every 25th of December, we hear his celebration as being the visionary who had conceived Pakistan. And Pakistan's, well, we haven't done too well. And as we know at the present time, we are in deep, deep trouble. But we don't know it. We've known this for a while. We've known this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And we say, the reason Pakistan didn't succeed is that we are not living up to the Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's vision. So I thought I should look at what that vision is, and if there is a vision. And I come to the conclusion that there was no vision. I don't say this because I have beef against Jinnah. I simply say this on the basis of evidence. A, he never wrote a manifesto for what Pakistan was to be. He never said that Pakistan should be secular or democratic or Islamic or anything else, whatever, communist, socialist, whatever. He never said those things, but he said different things at different times in all his speeches. And his followers can be divided into two camps. They are the Islamists, the conservatives, who say he's our man because he said that Pakistan should be an Islamic state and the Sharia is the best possible way of governing, that Islam has all the solutions. And there's a fat wad of speeches that you can make to that effect. And then there are the liberals who hang on to his two or three speeches actually, the most famous of which is on the 11th of August 1947, where he said, and every liberal knows this by heart in Pakistan, poor people, I feel so sorry for them. But he said, you can go to your mosque, you can go to your church, you can go to your temple, this has got nothing to do, no business of the state, and stuff like that. And in another speech he said, this is not to be a theocratic state, true, all that. But these are two or three fragmentary instances. The rest, it depends upon where he was, what audience he was addressing. Now it's even more serious than that. In the years leading up to partition, he was asked by the important people in his party, Raja of Mahmudabad in particular, who was his major funder, Mr. Jinnah, what is this Pakistan to be? And his reply was, let's see. He parried him. He went to Aligarh Muslim University in 1944, 45, 46, in the years before Pakistan, the years where the Pakistan idea was gaining steam. And the students over there asked him, sir, tell us, what is this going to be? Is this going to be secular, pluralistic, communistic, socialistic, whatever, whatever? And he said, don't ask me. And when somebody insisted, he says, anyone who asks me that question is an enemy of Pakistan. And he shut them up. I think it was brilliant. I think it's, he had to be ambiguous. Why? Because if he had said this is to be Islamic, then the question would be, what type of Islamic? Okay, then you get down to, is this going to be a Sharia state? Well, if it is, then will it be Maliki, Hanbali, four streams of four jurists in Islam? Which of them? And then what do you do about the Shias? So his reply was, so he parried that. Now, if he had said that Pakistan was to be a secular state, then everything would be lost, because he was competing against the Indian National Congress, which was led by Jawaharlal Nehru, who was openly and clearly secular. So he had basically no choice in that. And so his reply was, let us make Pakistan, let us get the land. When we have our country, then we shall decide what shape and form it is going to take, and we shall see what kind of governance and structure we will have. Unfortunately, that too did not prove true. 14th of August 1947, Pakistan is formed. He chooses to become Governor General and get into the administration nitty-gritty, and so no larger picture emerges from there. Yeah, just 2 minutes from that. 5 minutes. Okay, good. Oh, thank you. Generous. Okay. As a consequence, Pakistan has remained confused. Our people are still confused about what we are supposed to be. Now, I don't think we should be confused. I think that 76 years is good enough for us to have sort of gelled together. Yeah, I know we haven't, but it's long enough that people have lived together, they can speak to each other. And even though Urdu was not the lingua franca then, it has sort of become now. It's understood virtually everywhere. But this is one of the consequences of that. Anyway, since I have so little time, I'll just tell you the contents. I'll just read from the contents over here. So part 2 was a closer look at Pakistan's 3 founder heroes. Part 3 was postnatal blues. When a child is born, well, problems happen. 2 things happened. One was East Pakistan, which broke away, became West Pakistan. And it came because of the insistence of Islam being our only identity. And so all injustices had to be shoved under the carpet. Ultimately, that was the consequence. The second chapter of postnatal blues is that of Balochistan, a problem that still festers. Part 4, I address 5 big questions. First, was partition worth the price? 1 million people died. 14 million were displaced. Was it worth it? I don't give the answer as yes or no. I say, let's look at those who gained. Certainly the Pakistan military, certainly the big landlords. Who lost? The biggest losers were the Indian Muslims, the ones who are there today. And Maulana Abul Kalam Azad had foreseen this and spoken so forcefully about this. But anyway, this is a balance sheet. The next big question is, what is the ideology of Pakistan and does it matter? You know, it's very, very strange. You can get 10 years of imprisonment in Pakistan for speaking against the ideology of Pakistan, but no one knows what it is. It's not defined in any official document. I've looked and looked, I've looked at the historical documents, and no, it's not there. But anyway, that's worth exploring. Next big question, why couldn't Pakistan become an Islamic state? You know, there are a lot of people who think it's an Islamic state. Well, it's not. In fact, I go a step further. I say there has never been an Islamic state ever. Not even while the Prophet was alive. The Prophet had no desire, at least he stated no desire, for a state, a political entity to exist. Certainly as a religious community, as his ummah, his followers, he wanted them to exist, but not as a political entity. And there are no rules defined in the Quran or in the Hadith about an Islamic state. And if there is, I challenge anyone on that. I don't need to challenge because Maulana Maududi opposed Pakistan precisely on this basis. He says the concept of a geographical state is a European one. And he was very right. It goes back to the Treaty of Westphalia, 1648. It's not there in the Islamic texts. Anyway, there's much more than that over there. Next big question, why is Pakistan a Praetorian state? It's not quite the same as a garrison state. And if I want to give the answer in one sentence, it's because Mr. Jinnah had no supporters other than landlords who were basically thieves who wanted to grab the lands of the fleeing Hindus. And so when Jinnah died, they fought amongst themselves. The country was going to bits. And the only organized force that existed at that time, the only modern force, was that of the army trained by the British. Identity. The next big question, identity. I'm a Pakistani, but what am I? And I think this question is particularly relevant for so many of the people over here. My answer is, oh no, I won't give you the answer. Part 5 is the least interesting. Okay, 1 minute, yes. It's called looking ahead, but fortunately, I am now forbidden from speaking anymore. Yeah, but in terms of looking ahead, look, the biggest problems that we have are A, climate change is going to be devastating for Pakistan. B, the population explosion. We were 28 million and now we are 250 million, and we better stop breeding like flies, else it's going to be hell. And as yet, there's no realization of that. There's nuclear war. Okay, so we'll talk about that later. Last point. How to remake Pakistan. And we can make Pakistan again. But for that, we have to throw the two-nation theory into the garbage heap. Yeah, sure, without the two-nation theory, Pakistan could never have been made. But it's just like the placenta. The baby is born placenta. What do you do with it? Throw it away. Throw this away and let's have a one-nation theory. One-nation theory means that whoever lives within these geographical confines should have equal rights, irrespective of whether he is Sunni, Shia, Hindu, Christian, Ahmadi, whatever, and leave a little space for atheists as well. But that's the new philosophy that alone can make Pakistan a state that is worth living in. Thank you, and thank you for giving me an extra minute.
I'm going to introduce Dr. Salman Khan as discussant. He is a lecturer at the Department of Geography at the King's College. Salman's fields of interest are institutional analysis, local governance, informal economy, and he researches and writes about marketplaces, bazaars, and borderlands in South Asia. Salman, would you like to sit? Or you can continue to sit if you like.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah? Okay, go ahead.
Right. Thank you so much to Bloomsbury and Pakistan Discussion Forum for inviting me. And a fascinating book. All those 600 pages are too much to read, by the way. But yeah. And thanks to Professor HOODBHOY, who has made my job easy because I was going to talk about various parts of the book as he has done so. So the book, and I will start with one of the foreword of the book by Christoph Jafflet, and it's not written in any particular genre, although it does talk about history to look into the present and kind of think about the future. But this is, I think, one of the most important strength of this book, because anyone can, from an interdisciplinary perspective, engage with it and gets whatever they want to get out of it. The book has here and there, over 100 questions asked at various points of time and in various chapters, asking us to think about very thorny issues, some of which have been already explained by Professor HOODBHOY, so I don't need to go over them. But I think three things which I would like to talk about, and finally would offer some reflections. I don't want to open my notes because I think now it's much more clearer what the book is about and what we are looking at. So, yes, we don't need a two-nation theory anymore. I mean, we did not need it post-1947 anyway. But also, I think we can turn the question into a kind of a humor or a satirical question whether Qaeda-ism had a vision for Pakistan or not. Rightly said, no, but also I think Pakistan is still governed according to the vision of Jinnah when he asked people, don't ask me these questions, otherwise you are the enemy of Pakistan. And I think since then, this is what is happening throughout the history at various points of times when we have different forms of, sometimes direct military rule and sometimes military-backed civilian governments in the country. And with every passing decade, we have, Pakistan has more and more limitations on the freedom of speech. And this brings us to the second important issue which has been addressed in the book from various angles, but I think very importantly, thinking about the three, in the part 2 of the book, about the three founders of the two-nation theory or Pakistan. The education system, what does it produce, what is its aim, and what is it good for? I think throughout the history of Pakistan in the last 75 years, yes, some historical facts which have been demystified in the part 2 of the book are very important to know for every Pakistani or everyone who is interested in Pakistan or the history of Pakistan. But on the everyday level or in the everyday classrooms, it does not mean that these discussions do not happen. This reminds me of an anecdote by one of my colleagues who belongs to Sialkot, and when he remembers his day during the government of Ziaulak, and was like, there used to be this Pakistan studies teacher, and who would tell us what is the history of Pakistan. So yeah, 1965 war, we gain a victory against India. This is something that you have to write. But the actual fact is, it's who we did Gibraltar. And the story goes on, but I'll spare you the details of that. The point that I'm trying to make is, when Professor HOODBHOY starts the book, and this brings us back to the earlier discussion about what part do feelings play in when we are writing against objectivity. Of course, Professor is a distinguished scientist, and science believe in evidences in fact, but he states, inverted comma, I read this book because I'm angry. And rightly so, every Pakistani would be. Every Pakistani who has a smallest bent of critical thinking and who can ask questions should be angry and is angry at what the history has been, how we are doing, and a kind of a dead end in terms of future, but it's not that hopeless. That brings us, I'll spare you again the details of all the 3 or 4 parts, to the final part of the book where there are some suggestions, how do we remake Pakistan. And I would just pick upon 2 of those, not all of those, because if we go one by one throughout all of them, I may speak longer than. So we need to end up legal discrimination. And I think that's where, to make Pakistan we don't need a 2-nation theory, but a single nation theory, and that's where the foundation of it lies, and the route towards it lies as well. Since Pakistan was born, as we did not have any vision, it went into different directions, and whoever came in its way, or not even in its way, but the official narrative, which is Islam is our religion, Islam is in danger, and so on and so forth. I don't need to repeat the history, what happened to Ahmadis, what happened to Christians, what happened to Hindus, Shias, and so on and so forth. So I think that's where the end to legal discrimination in Pakistan. And the second, and I can combine this with the last one, the 7th or the 8th suggestion of how to remake Pakistan. And I really like the title of that. We need Pakistan, we don't need Punjabistan. And military needs to go into their barracks. Although somewhat wishful thinking in the context of Pakistan, taking into consideration the history and the current circumstances. But I think this is something that would really help remaking Pakistan into a united, or at least one nation, if not united. Now, a couple of things that I wanted to reflect upon the book overall. So, I think it is an interesting read for everyone who is not only interested in Pakistan, but everyone who is in Pakistan, and they can relate to it and identify various things based on their experiences. Although Professor HOODBHOY's teaching experience is 12, 13 years more than my life, but I think when you go through the pages of the book and the personal anecdotes, somehow and somewhere you can relate to the book and see it's actually that anger that is reflected in those anecdotes one way or the other. The second important feature of the book, to me at least, is setting the record straight historically. I particularly would refer to the parts in the part related to trouble angularities. Uh, what happened to Bangladesh? And this really goes back into how these different founders of Pakistan, such as Sayyid Ahmad Khan and Allama Iqbal or Qaid Azam, would think about Bangladeshi people. And if that was the vision of or the thinking of the founders of Pakistan, it was definitely bound to fail and bound to be partitioned and separated from Pakistan. Well, the rest of the details would be left to the readers to engage with the book and read with though that particular part. But I think for me, an interesting part in that regard was the last chapter of part 2, where three different personalities are compared or brought into the debates about the founders of Pakistan and the disagreements with them. So Abul Kalam Azad, Maududi, and Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Within that particular part, an interesting thing, and if one wants to see where did those visions collide and why Pakistan could not become a single nation, are very evident. Because rightly so, I'll just do a bit of back and forth between different parts of the book here on this particular feature. Because rightly so, and the question is rightly asked, who's Islam? If even Pakistan has to be an Islamic state. And particularly in post-70s or post-Zia Pakistan, we are seeing that it is becoming more and more dangerous, particularly after 9/11 with these takfiri rhetorics and takfiri ideologies. It has become more and more unclear what is Islam, who's Islam, and how are we going to implement that. If we are thinking that Islam could be some kind of a binding force, it is not in the context of Pakistan, nor in the context of the broader world. Finally, I think and allow me to say that the overall tone of the book, and before I say that, by the way, it engages with a couple of histories of Pakistan, and really critically engages. So, for example, the Indus saga written by Tizaz Ahsan, or the portrayal of the Islam adopted by the middle class by Amara Maqsoodan, right? The questions are rightly asked and answered in those parts of the book. So, overall, the tone of the book is depressing, and rightly so again. But I was really happy to read the epilogue of the book, because that's where the real hope lies. And it's not written, it's who we need to make it. So I think there's a lot to be talked about this book. And as I said in the beginning, everyone can engage with it from their own particular perspective. But I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And yeah, once again, thank you for inviting me. And I hope as I remain within the time limit.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Salman. I'd like to open the floor for questions because I'm conscious of time. Unless you would like to respond to something that someone said?
I think we should have.
Okay. So we'll open, if you could briefly just quickly introduce yourself and ask one question and be brief. So we'll start with Oh wow. Okay, I'm going to. Okay, so I'm going to let Halima take charge.
No, please you tell me just from this side.
From this side, if you could raise your hands, and then we'll come to this side as well. Okay. So we have somebody here, and then maybe two people from here, and then we switch to this side. Okay.
मेरा नाम M.K. पाशा है
जरा ऑन कीजिए.
आवाज़ चली जाएगी आप तक
नहीं, लेकिन सबको सुनना है ना.
ऊंची बोली
आप इधर आ जाएं.
मेरा नाम सर M.K. पाशा, मैं चेयरमैन पाशा फाउंडेशन खावड़ से हूँ. तो मेरा एक आपसे छोटा सा क्वेश्चन था कि हम लोग जो है अक्सरियत पाकिस्तान की जो है वो अपने आप को प्राउड फील करते हैं, हम सब प्राउड है अपने एटम बम के ऊपर. लेकिन जब हम मेरा बहुत हॉलैंड पे भी यूरोप के दूसरे मुल्कों में आना जाना रहता है, और जब हम कुछ हल्कों में बैठते हैं तो रियली एम्बैरसिंग फील होती है और शर्म आती है कि किस तरह हमारे इंतहाई पढ़े लिखे क्वालिफाइड आदमी ने चोरी चलो हार्ड वर्ल्ड है, इलीगल तरीके से चीज़ें उठाई और बदनाम ज़माना स्मगलर के थ्रू पाकिस्तान स्मगल की. तो वो हमारे मुस्लिम पाकिस्तान है और उस पर हम प्राउड करते हैं. तो क्या हमारी ऐसे ही रहेगा कि तारीख में जो हमें लूटने आते थे वो भी हमारे हीरो, जो हमारे लिए बाहर से लूट कर लाए वो भी हमारे हीरो?
देखिए, एटम बम की बात तो पुरानी हो गई है, कोई उस पर फ़ख्र करता नहीं. वो तो एक माजी की याद होकर रह गई है. एटम बम बनाना आजकल कोई बड़ा काम नहीं है साइंसी एतबार से. तो अब छोड़ दीजिए उस बात को. एटम बम से पाकिस्तान की कोई साख नहीं बनी. गो कि हमने ये सोचा था कि अब हम बहुत बड़ी आलमी ताकत बन चुके हैं, लेकिन ऐसा बिल्कुल नहीं हुआ. यही बात मैं हिंदुस्तान के बारे में कह सकता हूँ. इंडिया को आज किस लिए एक इतना ऊंचा मर्तबा हासिल है, ये नहीं कि उन्होंने बम बनाया, ये कि उसने अपनी मईशत को बेहतर किया. तो मईशत की बेहतरी एक मुल्क को मुस्तहकम और बड़ा बनाती है, एटम बम नहीं बनाता.
Okay, we have somebody here.
Thank you very much, Professor HOODBHOY. Just brief comment about it. When written this book, I think about the time of Renaissance, 14th century, when the people of wisdom, they challenge the authority and dogma and try to bring light to the society, and your work is really monumental in that context. Now my question is, let's say, with the creation of Pakistan, the historical nations, sorry, I forgot, I didn't tell my name. My name is Lakuluhana and I'm from Words in the Congress. The historical nations that existed for thousands of years, like Bengalis, like Punjabis, Sindhis, Balus and all that, they have been literally tried. And you talk about nation and your 5,000, you are really crushed. And that is currently happening. That what happened in Bangladesh and resulted, we saw the results. Now, how do you see, what is the future of these historical nations and what they should do to face this operation that is happening in Pakistan? Thank you.
Well, nations are historically constituted entities, and they are formed by the forces of nature, you could say, by geography, by the time that you live together. And in time, nations evolve, they change, they diffuse into other nations. Now, the process of nation building is one which every nation state has had to confront. You've seen this happen in France, in Germany, all over Europe. It's happening in the subcontinent as well. So it's something in which the different nationalities which constitute a nation state eventually will learn to live with each other, see each other as belonging to the same larger group of people. But the condition for that is that the state should be impartial. So it is in Pakistan absolutely necessary that it be a state for every citizen of Pakistan, irrespective of which part of the country she or he comes from, or religion, or sect, or language. Now, that kind of impartiality written into the law is what will eventually make Pakistan a nation. And if that does not happen, then history tells us that those states can break apart from each other. So let's see. This is a question that's still to be answered.
My name is Sayyid Saul Bacha. I just did my master's in environment, politics and development from SOAS. My question is that whenever Pakistani academics or writers they write about Pakistan's origin or identity, the colonial legacy is it's either forgotten or it's faded, but it's not really talked about. I mean, what are the reasons that India could produce like Spivak Chakraborty or Homi Baba, but Pakistan has no space for the post-colonial or decolonial discourse? And secondly, when you gave the recommendation of one nation theory, isn't it very homogeneous and an extension of the colonial legacy? Or
Okay, let me take your last one first. When I say one nation theory, I mean that every citizen of Pakistan should have absolutely equal rights, opportunities, and so forth. There should be no discrimination, that men and women should have absolutely equal rights as is specified in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So it's not that I want everyone to, wear the same uniform, but it's that they should have these rights as are universally acknowledged. In terms of breaking with the colonial legacy, well, we have broken with the colonial legacy in Pakistan, actually regressed in some ways because of that. Look at the curriculum that is being used in Pakistani schools, the government schools, even the private schools. I wish we had the colonial curriculum, because they would learn some things. They wouldn't waste their time, 60% of their time, just memorizing religious texts. So there's good and bad about colonization. We have taken the worst of it and we have thrown out the better parts.
Okay, so we'll start from this side and hopefully everybody will get a chance. If you could, yeah.
Sir, I just wanted to ask whether your book goes against the narrative built by Pakistani army and whether it is being published in Pakistan or not. And I also wanted to ask, why did Muhammad Ali Jinnah create Pakistan in the first place?
Why did he?
Create Pakistan in the first place.
Okay. This book is actually published in Lahore, which is still in Pakistan. Why did Jinnah want to make Pakistan? Because, that's a very good question actually, because he didn't hate Hindus. He, however, saw opportunity that here is a growing number of people who are fearful that when the British leave, that they will be at the mercy of the majority. Now, there was an element of fear. Mr. Jinnah actually built upon that and he exacerbated it. And he did so because that was the only way by which the Muslim League could remain relevant. And I give you very strong proof of that, because in 1937, the Muslim League was annihilated in the areas where there was a Muslim majority. So the parts that constitute Pakistan today, there was the Unionist Party allied to the Congress in Punjab. In the frontier, NWFP, it was again the Congress and with the government of Khan Sahib, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan's brother, etc. Comes 1937, he says, the Muslim League must now change its way of thinking. Now it should become expressly communal. It must say that religion and politics cannot be separated from each other. And I think that's where the Muslim League took off.
Okay, here.
Thanks to our professor. It It was so wonderful to hear you. I have rather a comment instead of a question. What we read and understood from our 1940 resolution we had from Ilham Iqbal and Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Jinnah, we understand that two-nation theory was basically that Ilham Iqbal had proposed Muslims trade separately because they thought the rights are not protected in India very well. This is the other case that more Muslims were in India, as somebody said, that Bangladesh was a separate entity. It was perhaps not fairly drawn a line between these two countries. However, I understand or very clear that the creation of Pakistan was based on Islamic State and because the Muslims were not protected very well in India. Now, that is maybe debatable, but what I just hear from one of the politicians in India, Shashi Tharoor, I follow him, and he's a great speaker about Indian politics as well. When Narendra Modi came into the power, and we see the Sikhs, Muslims for example, and we see Christians for that matter in India, and they've been victimized for some reasons on that. He proposed that the two-nation theory of Jinnah is now turning out to be true. What he thought was very well visioned at that time. So that has some basis in that. But maybe when I read the book, and maybe I have some answer, but I think we will continue on that.
Okay, yeah, I think you have a point over there, and it's one that's made by many people that look at India now. It's the Muslims are really getting a rough deal over there. Isn't this showing that the two-nation theory was right and the Jinnah was right? Well, let's reflect upon this a little bit. This was not how it was in 1947 and the years before that. The Congress was explicitly secular. Well, it wasn't fully secular. Of course, there was a Hindu element in there and a strong undercurrent over there. Yet, it had a strong enough secular face that for the years later, for the decades later, while the Congress was in power, there was a kind of balance between Hindus and Muslims. And remember, that balance has not been totally turned over. Look at, so for example, this Indian rocket, this Indian spacecraft which went to the moon, Chandrayaan-3. You know who the project director of that was? It was a Muslim woman. Now you can't even imagine that a Hindu would be in charge of anything important in Pakistan. They don't even let them into universities as lecturers. So it's a huge difference between India and Pakistan even now. In spite of the fact that the BJP I find absolutely abhorrent, but still, there's no comparison of India and Pakistan. We'll have to go on.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
yeah.
Yeah, my name is Shahid, and my question is relating to your book. Or may be an answer in there because I haven't read your book yet. You made a brief reference to loss of East Pakistan, making of Bangladesh. And I think you reference to that we hide many things under the carpet because using Islam. I think in my humble opinion, you may have mentioned that in your book once again, is that Mr. Jinnah was wrong in saying and imposing Urdu as a language to Bengalis. And that I think that was the clear-cut reason for separation in my opinion.
Sir, you are more than right. You are 105% right, because this book deals with the language question extensively, and particularly in Bengal. And with Mr. Jinnah making his first visit to Bengal 7 months after the creation of Pakistan, and the first thing that he goes and says over there is that Urdu is going to be the national language of Pakistan. And yes, that is very much, yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Is this on?
Yes.
My name is Ahmed Hanif. I'm a second year law student. My question is about how you say that the Pakistani identity is confused. Considering that it's confused and religion is indoctrined alongside military propaganda and the political elites not wanting progressive change through legislation, how do you envision a divorce between religion and our growth? Or how do you envision a change in identity within the Pakistani context?
A change from where to where? I'm sorry, I didn't quite get it.
So from the current identity of being a Islamic state, how do you envision a change that is more structured towards development and growth?
First of all, I am finding a little difficulty in accepting that Pakistan is an Islamic state. In what manner is it? Well, certainly it imposes certain things, certain restrictions on its civilians, on its citizens, but in many other respects, it is an utterly un-Islamic state. We have banks in Pakistan, and banks are forbidden in Islam. In fact, they've been forbidden from the beginning of Islam until the year 1728, when they were legitimized by the Ottoman Caliph. Now we have our banks giving interest, and interest is riba, and riba is haram. Then we are not an Islamic state. We don't take jizya from the non-Muslims living over there, when we should be, as an Islamic state, as understood by Maulana Maududi, and I could go on and on. How will this all change? Well, eventually it has to, because a pluralistic state cannot be a religious state. It's as simple as that. You like it, being here in Britain, because everybody is treated equally. Imagine that this became a Catholic state or a Presbyterian state or whatever. You wouldn't want to stay here anymore.
Okay, so the gentleman in the black jacket, you could raise your hand? Here, right here. And then we'll come to you after this. Sorry, I can't see you. Sure, okay, after this one.
Hello, Professor. My name is Shan. I'm a third year accounting and finance student here at SOAS, and I'm the president of the Pakistani Society here as well. I have a question that you discussed before while having your debate. You did mention that Jinnah didn't really make Pakistan as an Islamic state before, but he did have the motto of Ittihad, Iman, and Nizam, unity, faith, and discipline. So, with that being said, in the life of Jinnah, we couldn't really name it as Islamic Jamhuriyah, and Liaquat Khan was the one, I believe, in 1949 who officially named it as Islamic Republic of Pakistan. So, with that being said, at that point, Jinnah and the Muslim League did know that Muslims being the minority is not the right thing to be in future after British leave. So, just like that, do you think that, just as you said, that since it's not it wasn't Jinnah's motive, so what could be the perfect solution for it now that wasn't there at that point? Since we are here, I know the damage has been done. So how could we fix it all?
That's a very good question. What do we do now? So if a baby is born out of wedlock, do you kill it? You don't.
Yeah.
You bring it up in as normal a way as possible. And so here, what we need to do is to create a new Pakistan which treats everybody equally. We talked about that. And we need to create a new notion of patriotism, which is that not of saluting the flag or celebrating heroes of war. Instead, patriotism is to be understood as loving your fellow citizen.
Okay. Yes.
Asma here. I have two questions. One question and a query. Question is that when you say that we should go for one nation ideology now, what ideology is Bangladesh following, or what did they have to start their country when they separated? And my query is that Dr. Ishtiaq is also, Ahmed is also on all similar lines as you are writing and talking about. Have you collaborated with him, or would you consider, or something?
I have not collaborated with him, but I respect his writings, and he came to the black hole. Oh, there's no black hole there, but he was our guest several times at the black hole in Islamabad. So we think in much the same way. And what was the second part of your question?
The ideology Bangladesh.
By the ideology of Bangladesh. Oh, it doesn't really have an ideology. It's, yeah, you could say secular nationalism. It basically wanted to get away from Pakistan. That was the reason it was formed. But you know, behind your question is the larger issue, whether countries need an ideology. I don't think they do. What is the ideology of the United Kingdom? If you do know it, please let me know later. But what is it for Holland? They don't have an ideology, and countries are fine without ideologies.
Okay, yes.
My name is Iqbal. I'm a final year PhD student at Durham University. My question is, I'm not too clear on, let's say, why did the Deoband school of thought oppose the creation of Pakistan? Like, did they want to be part of, more like a secular India and be ruled by them? And then secondly, I interact here with a lot of youth who are part of Jamaat Islami, for example. And how do we still respect Maulana Maududi when, let's say, in every home you see his tafsir of the Quran, but at the same time he wrote a lot on political Islam, and he, in his book Khilafat wa Malukiyat, he openly criticizes the third caliph. So is there a lot of hypocrisy among us, and how we still continue to respect such people, given that he also played a very big political role in declaring Ahmadis as non-Muslims?
Yeah, in Khilafat or Malukiyat, he also talks about the nature of the Islamic State, and I mentioned a little bit earlier that he says that there is no such concept, and that is the basis on which he had criticized Jinnah and the demand for Pakistan. He also criticized Jinnah because Jinnah he saw as un-Islamic for personal reasons, his personal lifestyle. In terms of the Deobandis, well, the Deobandis were inward looking. And if you see the Deobandis in India and in Pakistan, they are very two different ways of thinking over there. The Deobandis in Pakistan are highly militant. Those in India are much more inward looking. But we can talk about that later.
Okay, there are two people from here, and there's one gentleman here, and then we'll have to. Okay. So what I can suggest is, can you ask your question? Can we take 3 questions from this side, and then Dr. Hoodbhoy can answer them, because otherwise we will run out of time. So go ahead and please be brief. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Professor, my name is Gul Muhammad, and my question is that if now that we can consider Pakistan is now a state. It's like a state of 24 million people. It is a reality.
240.
240 million people. So the question is that every citizen of Pakistan, as guaranteed in the constitution, has equal rights. So does the people of Balochistan, so does the people of Sindh, so does the people of Punjab and Gilgit-Baltistan. But sir, how can we imagine the democracy of Pakistan? Like Balochistan constitutes mainly or roughly half land of Pakistan. Like the total number of National Assembly seats of which the Balochistan represents are equivalent to the National Assembly seats of Sialkot and Gujranwala, if we both make them equal. So like place where people belong, where people constitute the half of the land of that country, how we can give them equal rights? And if we do not give them equal rights, so there are marginalized communities like there are Pashtuns, Baloch, so their voices can make a greater change. Secondly, sir, about Gilgit-Baltistan.
Can we stop over there? Because other people have to. But your question is very important. I'll come to that also. Yeah.
We'll see if we have time at the end. But could I ask?
Question,
you've already asked one question, so could I please ask you to?
But it's a great question. So let me answer that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Obviously, you cannot give Balochistan the same weight as the other provinces because of its much smaller population. So even if it's half the landmass or more, you can't give it 50%, right? So what is the solution? And I think the solution is to have far many more administrative units, call them provinces, break Punjab up, well, first of all, into a Seraiki province, and then what is then declare Gilgit-Baltistan as a province. But those two are too big. Consider the fact that Punjab, which is all the way from the north and extends halfway down the map, and has got 50% of the people, 54% of the people of Pakistan, is just one province. So it's obviously going to dominate. What you have to do is have much smaller administrative units, and in fact, there are proposals to have 123 provinces in Pakistan. This will break down all the political units and replace them with units that are administrative and allow local government to flourish instead of these big politicians. But we can talk about that later.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor, for coming. I just had a very quick question, and it's current to the problems that we're facing today. And I think it's the elephant in the room, really. How do we deal with the fact that we today have an army which has an overextended role to play, and that anyone who stands against them, either it's the politicians or everyone, either joins the bandwagon for their own benefit or they get suppressed? So how do you deal with an army which has solidified its base like that and is controlling the ideological frontiers of Pakistan as well? So how do you deal with that elephant in the room, which I really think is right now?
Yeah, they have the tanks. They've overpowered the political establishment. They have put all challengers in prison, or they've got them to flee the country. Now, this is not a situation that can be sustained indefinitely, because to maintain that, they've got to have an economy that's functioning, and this economy isn't functioning and it's going to collapse. There is no question that it is heading towards the precipice. Just look at the facts, how much we import, how much we export, how much expats are sending into Pakistan. There's a huge gap which can only be met by borrowing. And when the outside world stops pouring in that money, this army will fold up. Their tanks will not have fuel to run. That day is not too far off. And then what happens is anybody's guess.
Yes, please.
Hi, I think I have to qualify why I'm asking my question. I'm throwing it out there. So I'm speaking as someone that's been brought up in the two-nation theory, but rather lost in that I'm from West Punjab originally and don't belong anywhere. So not speaking as an Indian from East Africa, and I think that's very, very important, because we find ourselves, or a lot of people in the global diaspora generally, questioning what the hell is going on in India. And equally, you know, almost an empathy, and I would say an empathy with Pakistan, because we have different dynamics and relationships with it. So from that perspective, and because this is such a welcome forum, I really have to congratulate everyone involved on creating forums where dialogue like this can happen, and honest dialogues and honest writing, I think, which is so needed across the subcontinent and its diaspora. Where is, we've talked a lot about the one nation theory, but in this future of Pakistan, where is it in relation to beyond the borders specifically? And I want to really throw that idea out as well and ask you specifically, because, you know, my life experience, which is much of post-independence, let's say, is very much one of dushmani, very much of, you know, anti. So how does the new Pakistan engender that?
Good. I'm so glad you said you don't feel you belong anywhere. I don't either.
No.
And nobody should feel that they're associated with a piece of land. Look, it's stupid, because you didn't choose your place of birth. You didn't choose your parents. That you were born here or there is completely accidental. And heck, looking around the room, I can't even know who is Indian and who is Pakistani. Yeah? Actually, I thought You and the gentleman next to you were Indians. It's impossible to make
Well, we
out.
were 75 years ago.
So don't feel as if you need to belong somewhere. It's folly to think that you have roots elsewhere. Your root is the globe and nowhere else. That's it.
Okay, and one last question from that side. And then...
Hello, Professor. Thank you for coming. My name is Hasnain. Just two very quick questions. You just mentioned that Pakistan is not an Islamic state because an Islamic state would presumably have Islamic banking. But then you say that there is no such thing as an Islamic state. How do you reconcile the contradiction? And one more thing, you mentioned that whenever Jinnah would go and address a Hindu audience or people from other religious background, he would say that you're free to go to your temples and etc. etc. How is that any different from the spirit of Islam? Because from what I understand, Islam actually gave rights to prisoners of war, and this is not something that is unprecedented in Islamic history. Thank you.
Okay, so the reason I said that this is not an Islamic state is because the concept of state does not exist in Islam. In fact, there is no word in Arabic for state. The word riyasat is derived from Persian, not from Arabic. The word Dawla is now used in Arabic in the context of a state, but there was no concept then. Because remember, Prophet Muhammad never specified who would come after him. He never said who would succeed him as the leader of the Ummah. He did not conceive of his Ummah as a political entity, as I tried to tell you earlier. He never, the idea of a geographically bounded state comes way, way, way later, Treaty of Westphalia 1648. As far as interest goes, well, it's in the Quran where it says riba is interest, is haram. If you read the scholars of Islam, in fact, Maulana Maududi, he says riba is even worse than zina. Zina is sex outside marriage. So anyone who consumes interest can't be a proper Muslim, etc.
Okay. So I know that there is a cutoff for being in this hall, so we do end the proceedings right now. But before we do that, there is a short documentary. But I just want to thank everybody for being here, and as you said, for a very honest and open discussion. And I know that there are people who wanted to ask questions. So, Dr. Saab, if you're okay,
I'm fine. I'm
please
fine
come
with
over
you.
after the session ends and talk to Dr. Saab. And so over to you, Halima.
Can we have a round of applause? Book.
There are no second chances.
श्रोडिंगर की बिल्ली ने फिजिक्स की दुनिया को क्यों परेशान कर रहा है? बारे में क्या कहता था? देखा कि आप कांस्टेंट स्पीड पे चल रहे हैं कि नहीं चल रहे हैं, कोई बता सकता? इस लाइब्रेरी में किताबों के और आपको यहाँ मौसीकी भी सुनने को मिलेगी।
कोई रहमान के हक में, कोई भगवान के हक में, कोई रहमान के हक में, कोई भगवान